Hello and welcome to the Canon Reviewed, a podcast that looks at old books with new eyes and examines their continued relevance to contemporary readers. I'm your host, Daniel, and I'm delighted that you're here. Today, we look at Hamlet's soliloquy, How All Occasions Do Inform Against Me. He is finally done with all this waiting, all this inaction. He just needs one more little push. Well, we have lots to talk about, so please, pull up a chair by the fire, and let's talk some Hamlet. How all occasions do inform against me, and spur my dull revenge. What is a man if his chief good and market of his time be but to sleep and feed a beast no more? Sure, he that made us with such large discourse, looking before and after, gave us not that capability and godlike reason to fuss in us unused. Now, whether it be bestial oblivion or some craven scruple of thinking too precisely on the event, a thought which, quartered, hath 1 part wisdom and ever 3 parts coward. I do not know why yet I live to say this things to do. Sith I have cause and will and strength and means to do it. Examples gross as earth exhort me. Witness this army of such mass and charge, led by a delicate and tender prince, whose spirit with divine ambition puffed makes mouths at the invisible event, exposing what is mortal and unsure to all that fortune, death, and danger dare. Even for an eggshell. Rightly, to be great is not to stir without great argument, but greatly to find quarrel in a straw when honor's at stake. How stand I then, that have a father killed, a mother stained, excitements of my reason and my blood, and let all sleep, while to my shame I see the imminent death of 20,000 men that for a fantasy and trick of fame go to their graves like beds, fight for a plot whereon the numbers cannot try the cause, which is not tomb enough and continent to hide the slain. Oh, from this time forth, my thoughts be bloody or be nothing worth. Okay, now there's a whole lot of stuff that happens before Hamlet's speech on a solitary plain somewhere in Denmark. And we'll paint those things in pretty broad strokes, highlighting the changes in Hamlet's character. Now, key to keep in mind here is that Hamlet is acting as crazy as he can whenever he knows he's being watched. And, as we said, he is under surveillance constantly. The king doesn't trust him. His childhood buddies are spying on him. Everywhere there are eyes, eyes, eyes. He has Horatio, but that's it. So, with the assumption that everything he does is seen and analyzed and scrutinized, Hamlet becomes seemingly unhinged and starts this act in earnest by hurting someone he presumably loves. Now, he has just finished his to be or not to be soliloquy, and he stops talking to himself when he sees Ophelia coming towards him. Now, during the following conversation with her, Claudius and Polonius are hiding behind a curtain, observing the whole scene. We have to think Hamlet knows this, or else his treatment of Ophelia here is truly unforgivable versus just kind of hatefully repellent. The king wants to get to the source of Hamlet's behavior, and Polonius has suggested it's unrequited love, and they have set Ophelia here to see if it plays out that way. Now, Ophelia is perhaps not so innocent here. She goes along with this ploy. I mean, Polonius literally coaches his daughter how to act and what to say. So, perhaps in Hamlet's mind, this is just another example of someone he thought was close to him letting him down. Well, enough setup. Let's get to this encounter with Ophelia. She begins the conversation by saying she'd like to return the love letters he's given her, but he denies having ever sent them. And she's like, but you know you gave them to me. And he starts in on her, demanding if she's honest, meaning virtuous. Well, she's confused, of course, and Hamlet then tells her that she was deceived. He doesn't love her. Never did. He then tells her, quite famously, to get to a nunnery, which is a convent, of course, but in Shakespeare's day also connoted a brothel. So in short, he's calling her a prostitute. Now remember, he earlier referred to her dad as a fishmonger, so he's staying on theme. Hamlet then goes on some bizarre rant about the perfidy of womankind, how the prettier they are, the more damage they do, how women ruin men after marriage, how they're figures of deceit. And this whole time he's going off on this Ophelia laments to us, the audience, that this noble mind has here been o'erthrown. In short, he's crazy. Now, we've never really seen any interaction between these two yet, but we have to believe from certain bits of exposition that they are an item, or were. Hamlet tells her again to get to the nunnery and wanders off, having thoroughly broken Ophelia's heart. I mean, think of how confused she must be. She was just doing her father's and the king's bidding, but she ends up emotionally destroyed here. And it's here where the threads holding her mind together start to become frayed. You know, madness is a big and central theme in this play, and we always discuss it in terms of Hamlet. Is he or isn't he? But too often overlooked is the cost that Ophelia pays from future events. She's dismissed as a character sometimes. I feel she's treated like an interesting side case, but I feel that she is centrally important to the themes in Hamlet, that revenge has unintended victims in its wake. Ophelia deserves none of what's about to befall her, but the treatment she receives is casual at best. Anyway, Polonius and Claudius emerge from behind the curtain, and the king is like, I'm thinking the whole love angle ain't it. And Polonius doesn't really comfort his daughter, but rather insists on his position. He then tells the king that after the play, he'll send Hamlet to the queen, who will speak roundly with him, and that, and this is big, he'll hide there too, to listen in on the conversation. Polonius's nosy nature, his commitment to this type of spycraft, will be his doom. Okay. Well, now it's time for the play. Hamlet confronts the lead actor and is all, now, did you memorize my lines? Are you ready? You remember how I told you to deliver them? Again, Shakespeare has this delightful meta moment about actors and acting here that's quite lovely. You can see the eye rolls from the lead player here as Hamlet tells him how to do his job. All is set. Things are ready to go. This is Hamlet's moment to ensnare the king. Horatio shows up and Hamlet asks him to watch the king during the performance, see how the show affects him. Trumpets sound and the court assembles to watch the play entitled The Mousetrap. Before the show, Gertrude asks Hamlet to sit by her, and he's like, no, I want to cuddle up here. And he sits with Ophelia as if nothing whatsoever had happened before. She tries to engage him in conversation, but he's all addled, probably from manic excitement because he knows he's about to prove his uncle's guilt. And sure enough, the players enact the murder of Gonzago, and it's exactly like the ghost depiction of his own murder. Claudius gets upset, calls for lights, storms out of the theater, and there it is. Hamlet's proof. His uncle murdered his father. Irrefutable. But now things are about to take off, and Hamlet will have little control from here on out. The king knows that he knows, and Hamlet will have to be dealt with. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern show up and tell Hamlet that his mom's pretty pissed, and she wants to see him right away in her chambers. Hamlet is pretty dismissive, and Rosencrantz is like, my lord, you once did love me, and Hamlet's like, I still do, but you guys betrayed me. He then finds a recorder and asks Guildenstern to play it, but Guildenstern says he can't, that he has no touch of it. He has not the skill to play it. To which Hamlet wonderfully says, why, look you now, how unworthy a thing you make of me. You would play upon me, you would seem to know my stops, you would pluck out the heart of my mystery, you would sound me from my lowest note to the top of my compass. And there is much music, excellent voice in this little organ. Cannot you make it speak? Splud, do you think I am easier to be played on than a pipe? Call me what instrument you will, though you can fret me, you cannot play me. Never really known what it is, but I love that moment from Hamlet. Well, then Polonius shows up, reiterates the queen's demand, and Hamlet sends them all off saying he'll be there when he's good and ready. and he gears himself up for this conversation by saying he'll speak daggers to his mother, but use none. We then cut to Rosencrantz and Guildenstern talking to the king. They confirm Hamlet's out of sorts, and the king tells them that they will accompany Hamlet to England, where Claudius is going to send him on some journey to claim some unsent tribute or something like that. Now, he has other motives, as we'll later see. While Polonius tells Claudius that he'll be in the queen's room, hidden so he can hear everything. Then, the king finds himself alone, and he utters the prayer so beautifully rendered by Jake in the last episode. Hamlet spots him, draws his sword, but he can't do it. Not while Claudius is praying. He'll go right to heaven. Nope, Hamlet has to kill him when he's performing some sinful act. Again, another delay, and another analytical justification for it. So much could have been avoided at this moment. But Hamlet's religiosity once again gets the better of him. Now we come to one of the weirder scenes in all of Shakespeare's plays, and various directors have staged it in all sorts of ways, but no matter what, Hamlet's bedroom scene with his mom is kind of out there. It's a scene full of physicality and anger, and it's oddly sensual as well. Perhaps I should explain. So, before Hamlet shows up, Polonius does his hide behind a curtain thing, and then Hamlet strides in and he's like, "What's up, Mom?" And she's like, "You offended your father." And he's like, "No, you offended my father." And he's rude. And so she asks if he's forgotten who she is. And he's like, "Of course not. You're my uncle's wife, and unfortunately, my mother." She responds, as you'd imagine. But then Hamlet grabs her angrily and begins to push her over to a mirror so that he can show her the innermost part of her. Well, given his state of late, she has no idea what he's really doing, so she cries out, "Are you going to murder me?" Well, this makes Polonius call out from behind the curtain, and Hamlet screams, "A rat!" and stabs through the cloth, killing Polonius. When he sees the body, he's pretty bummed, because he was hoping it was Claudius. "I took you for your better," he says to the old man's corpse. Well, killing Polonius is kind of a big deal, and this will set all sorts of things in motion, but Hamlet really isn't that worked up about it. He's on a mission to get his mother to his side of thinking. Now, Gertrude, rightly, is a little freaked out, but Hamlet tells her to stop wringing her hands. The intruding fool deserved it. He begins to condemn her for her life choices, making a very big deal about her sex life and the incestuous bed she's sleeping on. He asks her to compare his uncle with his dad and demands she explain how the hell she could jump into Claudius's arms after being so loved and in love with his father. All the while, he's sort of pushing her around, and the scene is often played as very physical and definitely uncomfortable. There's more talk of incest, and then Hamlet describes his father's murder, and his mom tells him that he has cleft her heart in twain. And at the peak of his anger and his self-righteousness, the ghost reappears to him. Gertrude doesn't see it, and this is her final proof that Hamlet's lost it. Now, his father's ghost comes here to remind him that he's to leave his mother alone, and that this whole scene is but to whet his almost blunted purpose. His dad's like, "Son, you got a job to do, and you're wasting time." Hamlet tells his mom that he has to go to England with his old chums, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, whom he will trust as adders fanged, and she already knows and is forlorn about it. She doesn't know the real reason for the voyage, however, nor does Hamlet. Finally, Hamlet makes to go, for he needs to stow Polonius' body somewhere, but before leaving makes his mom promise that she won't sleep with his uncle anymore. This takes a few pages, of course, for Hamlet really needs to hammer this idea home. He calls out, "Good night, mother," and Act 3 concludes with him dragging Polonius out of the room. Act 4 opens up with Claudius and Gertrude in their room, and she tells him what Hamlet did. This initiates a total castle-wide hunt for both Hamlet and the body. And when they finally catch him, Hamlet is unwilling to say where he hid Polonius. "You'll smell him after a while," he says to Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. Now, Hamlet is brought before the king, and when asked where he put the old man, Hamlet responds that he's at dinner. No, not where he eats, but where he is eaten, and then goes on to describe how the circle of life and death works with a metaphor about worms and kings and passing through the guts of a beggar. "You're a mess," Claudius tells him, "and a danger to yourself and others, and as such we need to get you out of Denmark until all this settles over." "Good," says Hamlet, and the king replies, "It is, if you knew my purpose for it." and Hamlet cheekily utters that he sees a little angel that knows them. So Hamlet is whisked away, and the king alone now shares, with us the audience, that the letter Hamlet carries with him requests that the King of England put Hamlet to death. When next we see him, he is walking presumably to the shipyard with Rosencrantz and Guildenstern and a handful of guards. Now on the way, he encounters a Norwegian soldier who's part of some army regiment. Hamlet asks him whose army this is and is informed it's young Fortinbras's, the nephew of the Norwegian king. Now, this guy's been mentioned before in the play, and his story is kind of a parallel to Hamlet's in a sense. Anyway, apparently this army had leave to cross Denmark on its way to do some battle in Poland. And as Hamlet watches the army march away, it gets him thinking again about action. And as he compares himself to Fortinbras here, he finally comes to terms with his mission. And we finally come to the soliloquy for this episode, how all occasions do inform against me. Let's go ahead and break it down. How all occasions do inform against me, and spur my dull revenge. So begins Hamlet's final long soliloquy, though he still has much to say in the play. What this line literally means is that every circumstance thus far that has beset him is denouncing his utter lack of action. His revenge is dull, like a pointless knife edge. And this brash young Fortinbras and his army is kind of the last straw for Hamlet. Yet another example of manly action, and as we'll see, a pointless act, which makes Hamlet feel even worse since, as we'll soon hear, he has an actual purpose. To continue. What is a man if his chief good and market of his time be but to sleep and feed? A beast, no more. Sure, he that made us with such large discourse, looking before and after, gave us not that capability and godlike reason to fust in us unused. Hamlet has, several times really, explored the nature of and purpose of a man in this play. Now, I'd like to say that he's talking about humanity in general, but my suspicion is that he just means men. What is a man for? It can't be to eat and sleep. That just makes him an animal. God didn't give us the ability to know the past to inform the future, infusing us with godlike reason to just have it all go unused. Hamlet's once again chastising himself for his inability to take control of his situation. He has learned the truth. He knows the past, and yet he's acting like a stupid animal by not allowing that truth to dictate his future. So then, what the heck is wrong with him? Well, he explains. Now, whether it be bestial oblivion or some craven scruple of thinking too precisely on the event, a thought which quartered hath but 1 part wisdom and ever 3 parts coward, I do not know why yet I live to say this things to do. Sith I have cause and will and strength and means to do it. It's at this line that Hamlet truly understands his weakness, the thing that's holding him back. Now, it could be cravenness, cowardice, but he doesn't really think it's just that. No, it's that analytical mind of his paralyzing him, as he says. He is thinking too precisely on the event. And then a great parenthetical aside where Hamlet says that overthinking is really 1 part wisdom, 3 parts coward. I love that. I mean, he thinks this must be the crux of it, because if not, he has no idea why he still can say this thing's to do. He has everything he needs for action. He has cause. He has the will to execute it, the physical strength to carry whatever it is out, and the means. I mean, he's the damn Prince of Denmark, after all. Obvious examples of what he should be doing are all around him, have been all around him. Now, the most recent is this Norwegian army. He says, "Witness this army of such mass and charge, led by a delicate and tender prince, whose spirit with divine ambition puffed makes mouths at the invisible event, exposing what is mortal and unsure to all that fortune, death, and danger dare, even for an eggshell." Now this is great. He's drawing here a comparison between him and the Norwegian prince, a character of action and ambition, who makes faces at danger, courting it at every turn, fearless in the faith of death and all the question marks lining up before him, all that, fortune, death, and danger stuff. And for what? Hamlet has a father's murder to avenge, but Fortinbras? He marches steadily on to a battle for a piece of land that Hamlet refers to as an eggshell, a little meaningless spot of land. But Fortinbras is great. But again, Hamlet steers himself more towards analysis. But really, he's actually contrasting himself with Fortinbras, kind of making fun of him. He says, rightly, to be great is not to stir without great argument, but greatly to find quarrel in a straw when honor's at stake. So, you shouldn't just jump headlong into combat for nothing. No, the argument must be great, but when honor's at stake, you fight like hell. So essentially, Hamlet is arguing that Fortinbras has no real cause to be doing what he's doing. Now, he explains that in a minute, but what this really does now is, it depresses him a bit. He says, well, how stand I then, that have a father killed, a mother spoiled, excitements of my reason and my blood, and let all sleep, while to my shame I see the imminent death of 20,000 men that for a fantasy and a trick of fame go to their graves like beds, fight for a plot whereon the numbers cannot try the cause, which is not tomb enough and continent to hide the slain? So, he says, here I am with all these actual real problems, and I have been letting them all sleep, putting them aside, while this puffed-up princeling is marching his army to their deaths for some fantasy, where the losses he will surely suffer, those men of his going to their graves and their dead bodies, they won't even fit on the tiny plot of land he's fighting for. A trick of fame sends these men to imminent doom. It's insane. Yet, he's doing something. Misguided action is better than nothing, Hamlet supposes, and seeing this army gets him pretty worked up. Now, he's badmouthed himself before, but this time he means it, and he finishes the soliloquy with, "Oh, from this time forth, my thoughts be bloody or be nothing worth." Now, as we will see, those thoughts will become bloody actions indeed. He doesn't get to England, for he knows what's in store for him there. And in another cruel turn, Hamlet essentially kills his old buddies Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, for he knows that England will execute the bearer of this letter he was sent with, and that those two now possess. So as Rosencrantz and Guildenstern go off unwittingly to their deaths, Hamlet makes his way back to Denmark. But he will find things have changed quite dramatically in his absence. Thank you so much for sitting by the fire with me. Now please rate and review the podcast, as it does make it easier for others to find. And if you like what you're hearing and intrigued by where it's going, please consider supporting the show on Patreon at www.patreon.com/The Canon Reviewed. You'll find a few tiers to choose from, as well as an invite to our Discord community. Now, I've begun to slowly put these episodes up on YouTube, so do me a favor and search for the podcast there and subscribe. I'd really, really appreciate it. Now look, this podcast is a conversation as much as anything else, so please send an email to thecanonreviewed@gmail.com with your thoughts and observations about the works under study, as I'd love to include them in future episodes. I'd like to take a quick moment here to thank our 3 head librarians, Jeff Seplak, Jesse Cunningham, and Jake Frounfelter, for their continued support on Patreon. The appreciation of your generosity that I feel is boundless and limitless, and I appreciate you 3 so much. Now, next time, we'll finish our work with Hamlet, as we study the stunning conclusion of this most epic work. And, of course, we'll weigh the play on the relevancy scale as well. Now, today's final read comes from Act 4, Scene 5. Ophelia has lost her mind from grief. Her father's death by the hand of her lover has proven too much. She's wandered into the great hall singing and throwing flowers around, and Claudius has her attended to. And after she leaves, he turns to Gertrude and predicts what's to come. Oh, this is the poison of deep grief. It springs all from her father's death, and now, behold, oh, Gertrude, Gertrude, when sorrows come, they come not single spies, but in battalions. First, her father slain, next your son gone, and he, most violent author of his own just remove, the people muddied, thick and unwholesome in their thoughts and whispers for good Polonius' death, and we have done but greenly and hugger-mugger to inter him. Poor Ophelia, divided from herself in her fair judgment, without the which we are pictures or mere beasts. Last, and as much containing all of these, her brother is in secret come from France, feeds on his wonder, keeps himself in clouds, and wants not buzzers to infect his ear with pestilent speeches of his father's death, wherein necessity of matter beggared will nothing stick our person to arraign in ear and ear. Oh, my dear Gertrude, this, like to a murdering peace, in many places gives me superfluous death.